the two ways I asked for help, one was that I had checked into that psychologist. I remember her saying to me, she said, Wendy, you've had a very violent life. You've grown up in South Africa. You've been tear gassed. You've been shot at. Then you come to Australia and then you're in a bank robbery. Then you meet this person and she said, there's just violence after violence. And she said, no wonder you're so traumatized. See, I never saw it like that. All you're doing is you're surviving.
Life Reimagined with Stacey Ray.
Hi, everybody. I am so honored to introduce you to Wendy Alexander, who is based in Melbourne, Australia. And she's here to chat with me about her personal journey of overcoming significant hardships, such as growing up during apartheid in South Africa, experiencing domestic abuse, and facing financial struggles as a single mother. These experiences have led her to become the founder of the very successful Happy Career Hub, where she empowers midlife professionals, especially women. And I'm thrilled to say hi, Wendy.
Hello.
It really is nice to meet you. I know that you have quite an interesting story. If it's okay with you, I would love to start with the fact that you grew up in South Africa during
Yeah.
apartheid.
Yeah, so look, I'd say the first few years as a young child, I didn't realize that I was growing up in that kind of segregation and that kind of country, because as a kid, you don't know it. I was introduced to the realities of South Africa and apartheid when we went to the beach one summer, and I was just about turning 7 years old. And we were probably only on the beach for about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, when two police officers turned up. And they told us we had to leave the beach. And I remember, like, what's going on? Why do we have to leave the beach? And I was staring at my father. And I noticed in his face this rigidness, this tension. And I thought, I'm a young kid. I don't know what's going on, but I know something's wrong, because I looked straight to my father, who was always like a hero to me, and I was very close to Dad. And so I'm watching Dad, and he just sort of shuffles us all up and says, we've got to get in the car, and we go. And only as we drive off the beach, sort of hidden by like a bush or a type of tree, I see this sign that said whites only. And so I start harassing my father in the car, asking him questions like, what's going on? What does it mean? Why was that sign there? And my dad had always indulged my curiosity, because I was always a curious kid. So I was always asking a lot of questions about lots of things. But this time he said to me, he said, will you for once just be quiet? And so when we got home, obviously now we're in the safety of our home, he sat us kids down. And he said, this is what you're growing up in. This is the country. This is the laws of the country. He said, we classified into 3 groups. He said, there's the white group, black group, colored group. Colored group is me, because we have mixed race, so I had 2 white grandparents, 2 black grandparents. And so Dad said, this is the reality of what you're living in. And the reason they put us off the beach was because that was a whites-only beach. And all of us are not allowed to go to all the beaches, all the cinemas, all the restaurants, all the this, or, you can't get in the same carriage on the train. My 7-year-old brain is trying to process it, but obviously it can't. I'm too young. But I remember in that moment, it was almost like my childhood fell away, because I remember becoming very serious, wanting to know a lot more, starting to look for answers, even though I was really young. But it wasn't until my teenage years where I became a bit of a rebel and an activist in the country. And that did a lot of things to my mother, because she was always worried that I would come home safely, because the police would just come in. There would be police brutality. There'd be, I got tear gassed, I don't even know how many times. So that was life in South Africa until I was 20 years old when we migrated and left for Australia. What I will say is that I never really realized that while I was there. I knew I was living in harsh circumstances, but you just go with it and you're fighting it and you're resisting it. It's only when I left South Africa that I was able to kind of breathe and exhale a little bit that I realized there was a lot more psychological impact.
During apartheid, there were white beaches. Were the whites allowed to go to any beach they want?
That was obviously the unfairness of it all, was that they could go to any beach. The whites that came to our beaches or that got in our train carriages or came to our restaurants were the ones who were also fighting the resistance. Right? So I won't say all of the white people took advantage of their privilege. No, they didn't. There were a handful, I would say 5 to 10%, who were fighting the government and fighting the resistance and fighting for the freedom and the equality of the black and colored people. But they were a small minority, they were a small number, and they were the ones who would come and mingle with us. So wherever we were allowed to go, they would go. But they also, the other thing is there was, I suppose it was a different fight for them. And regardless, I still appreciate the fact that they did fight for us. But it was a different fight for them because they were protected by the laws. So they could come onto our beaches and they could put up a resistance, but there was nothing that was going to threaten their safety. In the end, it's how safe you feel.
It's always been hard for me to understand how race is such a thing that creates such destruction. But from a mental health perspective as well, I mean, how does one wake up in the morning and feel valuable and included in society and as a productive member of society when they're being told by their government, by their neighbors, by the storekeeper, hey, you're only a this?
I think that's what I meant when I said I only realized the repercussions later when I had left South Africa. Because when you're in the country, when you're trying to survive, I think you're very focused on survival. And you're very focused on just getting through every day. And for my parents, it was like, we just want our kids to come home safely every night because we don't know what's going to happen to them. My parents kept life quite light for us as much as they could. This is within the safety of our community. But the moment you step out of that, you don't know what's going to happen. It was 1985. I was in my final year of high school. That was a particularly violent year. It was the year where the uprising got to boiling point. And so colored schools were closed, neighborhoods were closed, and so you had to go and sneak out to get your lessons from your teachers. And a lot of the teachers taught from their homes, and we would go to their homes because the government closed the schools, but they still expected you to sit your final exam. Parallel to that was when my father started to apply for migration out of South Africa because he could see the impact on my mom. It was impacting her health and, her blood pressure. She had high blood pressure at the time. Doctor couldn't bring it down, but she was stressed, worried about her kids. And my father is an incredibly resilient man because we were rejected many times for migration and he never stopped applying. And probably I'd say the 12th or 15th time was when we finally got the acceptance to go to Australia.
That must have been the most joyous day of his life, huh?
Oh, it was.
I mean, talk about having a party.
Yeah, we did. And my brother was turning 21 that year. And so we only had a very short time for him to get out of the country because once he turned 21, he would then have to apply on his own. So we had his 21st birthday early. It was the big party, the party to celebrate all parties, his birthday, the fact that we were leaving the country, that we've been accepted. But I will say what we didn't anticipate, and I suppose you never do, when we arrived in Australia, is the country was so different that we were kind of shell-shocked. And that was when I recognized that some of that subliminal programming that you have growing up in that kind of place, it was still sitting in the psyche, because it was probably a couple of months after we arrived in Australia. My cousin and their family had been here about 5 years before us, and she was taking me into the city. She said, I'm going to take you into Melbourne City. And we're standing at the train station and we're waiting for the train. And I said, which carriage do I have to get on? She said, you're not in South Africa anymore. She said, you can get on any carriage. You can go wherever you want. And that was the realization for me. And I was 21 years old at the time. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm in this country and I'm still living with looking over my shoulder.
How long did it take you to stop looking over your shoulder?
I would say it took the family, and this is including my siblings, it took us about 2 to 2.5 years to fully settle into the country. Up until then, we were all quite nervous. We weren't really ourselves. And when I look at things and I see new migrants coming into Australia now, even, I can see how hard it is for them. It is not, especially when you've come from a conflict-driven country. A lot of people don't understand that yes, even if you want to leave your country and you're looking for a better life, you still leave big parts of you behind when you leave your place of birth, you know? So it took a while for me to actually settle into Australia. And same with my siblings. We all got quite homesick. And I remember us saying to our parents, we want to go back to South Africa, and my dad's looking at us like we're crazy, like. But it wasn't so much a desire to actually go back to the country. It was the fact that we missed our family, we missed our friends there, but we also didn't really know what to do with the newfound freedom. It took a while for it to sink into the brain, the heart, the spirit.
What was the hardest, let's call it freedom, that you found to accept?
Well, I mean, for me, it was just realizing that I could go anywhere, because I was still always worried that I was going to end up in the wrong place and that I was going to get kicked out or, threatened with jail or something like that. You're worried. When you've worried about that your whole life or for 20 years of your life, it's not that easy to shed, Eventually you become, I remember looking at Nelson Mandela, and he was talking about how the routine even of being jailed for 27 years in South Africa, he was our political prisoner. And then he became the prime minister, the president of the country when he was freed. But it takes a while. It takes a while to shed the shackles,
Absolutely. So when you got to Australia and you started to adjust, I hate the word assimilate because I don't think there's any such thing, but as you started to adjust to your new life and the opportunities that were available to you, where'd you go from there?
Well, so that was probably the 2 years it took. And then I was studying at the time. I was at university because I started my university in South Africa and then finished my final 2 years in Australia. But parallel to that, what I remember was that people were incredibly curious about me. And that was a little bit traumatic, because at that stage, the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, a bunch of countries were starting to sanction against South Africa. So they were becoming more and more aware of what was going on in the country. And they were imposing sanctions on the country to try and force the government to end apartheid. And so people, when they found out I came from South Africa, they were so curious about me, and I was bombarded with questions. And what happened there, and I think this was also part of the reason it took a while to adjust, was I had to relive the trauma over and over because I was telling the story over and over. And I was quite a shy person, and so that alone was like people coming at me once they found out where I was from and asking me so many questions. Was overwhelming. But eventually I realized that sharing the story was one way to release it, but also a way to I suppose, help other people understand what life was like there, and also to try and educate in a sense that we don't end up doing this again. And yet humankind, look at us, we keep making the same mistakes over and over
We
and
learn
over.
nothing. We
We
learn
learn nothing.
nothing. No,
We learn
no.
nothing. And that's what I realized. I
Mm-mm.
was like, and then
Yeah.
of course I also find out Australia's got its own history with its indigenous people. It's not over. It's never been over. And I've traveled the world because I'm a passionate traveler. So I go to Europe and I've traveled the world. And I will say there's not been one country where I haven't encountered something. Now, it's not always directed at me. I'm fortunate. Like sometimes I go there and I'm welcomed and I'm treated really well in the country, but I see it directed at other people in the country.
And, I also am an avid traveler, and I think, I own a travel company just for women. And which you must travel with us. I'm
Yes,
going to
I
take
would
you on a
like to.
trip. Oh, I would love that. We see everywhere that we go. Um, I see it on both sides. I see from some of our women, like my philosophy is that we should be leaving more than we take. And that doesn't always mean monetarily. Sometimes it means respect, understanding. And sometimes, nothing makes me cringe more when, you're talking to women in a different culture and like, well, how could you let the men do that to you? Well, slow down there
Mm-hmm.
because you're coming at it from a place where you're forgetting where you live and what's happening where we live. But also, it's not our place to do that.
No,
That is just absolutely not our place. And how do you expect peace and understanding if you have no respect for other people's way of life and their culture, their traditions? When I was in South Africa, when I saw the way um, black people are treated because so many are in the safari industry because that's what we were
yes,
there for. I was actually a little horrified because our tour leader actually felt quite free in saying in multiple settings, well, I can say that because I'm white. I was horrified.
yep,
Horrified.
yep,
Like as if I would ever do that, but I mean it's
yep,
just, and that's why I say, and he's South African. So the
yeah.
reason I bring that up is because it doesn't change, does it? When you have that built in.
No, even when you think there's freedom in the country, right? Nelson Mandela is released from prison. He becomes the first black president of the country. Um, people have grown up ingrained with certain belief systems, and when where you see it is when they suddenly have a level of power, right? Or they think they have a level of power over someone who might be a hospitality worker or might be a tour guide or a tracker on a safari, right? Suddenly their superiority comes out, and you see it everywhere. It doesn't matter where you travel. I've said to my daughter, you have to walk in life like, even if it's coming at you, you have to carry yourself with a level of strength and upright and treat
Exactly.
people the way you want to be treated, even if they're
Absolutely.
treating you badly, you step up and you greet, you be polite, you allow them to have their prejudices, you put your boundary up in terms of you don't let it come at you, but you just let you because you're not going to change that. It's like you say, you have to respect certain cultures and the way people are without allowing them to walk over you.
So you finished your university degree
Finish
and
university, and then I landed a role at the bank because I wanted to take a break. Like I had studied psychology and languages, but I decided to go work in a bank. I'm like, I need to just breathe. I want a year of just, and so I ended up working in a bank, and I was only in the job about 3 months when the bank was held up, and I was the person that had the gun to my head. So,
no way.
and And I was just like, I remember, in the moment, you just do what they tell you because there's a double barrel shotgun right there. But obviously after that, there was a year or two of counseling because, you go through incredible trauma when that kind of situation happens. And then parallel to that, maybe not long after that, I also met my daughter's father. And he was from America, and we ended up in a relationship. We were together for about almost 10 years, like just shy of 10 years. The first 5 years was good, but after that, there was volatility in the relationship. And it finally ended when I was 4 months pregnant. And so I was like, man, I was really attracting some strange things in my life because I'd had that situation. I'd just come through the
Right.
counseling with being held up. And then I go through this situation with my daughter's father, and we split up, but it was an acrimonious and quite violent split. So he had an affair. I found out. I ended the relationship. But he acted as though, I don't know if a flip switched in his brain. I don't know what happened, but he acted as though I'd had the affair. So there was domestic violence, and I was pregnant, and I almost lost the baby. He walked away from all the debt. He cleaned out the bank accounts.
He left you with all of it.
Left me with all of it. I call that the rock bottom of my life because it really was. I was in such a state. I moved back home with my parents, and they helped me through those last months of the pregnancy to deliver the baby safely and so on and so on. But I remember thinking, now what? One of the things I did do was I went to counseling. I found a psychologist and I started working with her. And she was amazing in that she gave me the first 2 sessions. She allowed me to do the dumping, all the releasing of what had happened, all the emotions, the blame game, because there was a big blame game going on. I definitely was blaming him, and it was all him. I had nothing to do with it, which of course is never true, right? We attract whatever in our life. But then the third session, she asked me, and I still to this day, I actually wrote about it then, but I to this day consider that one of the most important questions anyone's ever asked me, because the third session, she said, okay, we've gone through all this. You've explained what happened. And she said, now I have a question for you. This was at the end of the third session. And she said, who were you in the world that you attracted this to yourself? I was like, ouch.
That is an ouch question.
And I remember viscerally in my body reacting and thinking, how dare you, lady? And I felt like I wanted to punch her.
Yes. I feel like right now I'd like to punch her for you, but go ahead.
But she noticed my body language. And she said, before you react, because I can see your reaction, she said, before you react, I want you, she said, I know you love writing. I know you journal a lot. She said, I want you to go home and answer that question through your writing. And when you come next time, we'll discuss it. And I thought, okay, I calmed down enough, went home, pulled out the journal and started writing. And as I was writing, that was when the unraveling of all the patterns, all my own self-esteem issues from growing up as a woman of color in South Africa, all of the stuff starts coming through the writing. And I wrote every day on that week. And I was like, yeah, who am I? Like, I have not healed certain parts of me. No wonder I attracted a relationship where this guy wasn't good to me. And I could have left any time, especially after the 5th year when things started to go up and down in the relationship. It became a roller coaster. We broke up probably 2 times and I went back to him 2 times. And so I was like, okay, hang on a minute. She's right. And it was very powerful. I went back to the session and we started working through that. We started to work through all the wounds that were buried within me that led me to the life that I ended up with, right? That, not not standing up for myself, not, going back to someone who was abusive twice. And it was interesting because as that's happening, I'm also realizing I have to start again. I've lost everything. I have this daughter. I don't want to be an example of a victim for my daughter. That became very clear to me as I was writing. That was the inquiry into my own life that made me start to turn it around. And then I started to ask questions like, okay, how do I start again? Where do I start? And I was like, I need to make more money because I've lost everything. So I've got to start again. I've got to be able to feed this baby. I've got to be able to save money to buy a new home, and so on and so on. And as I'm asking the questions, I'm like, okay, I need to talk to people who give people jobs, who give people better jobs. So I became very logical, very practical. I was like, and I worked through my budget. I looked at the debt that I owed because I was left with a lot of debt when he walked out. Now, I was still quite an introvert, very much an introvert at the time, and, working my way through all the wounds with the psychologist.
Right.
And I was like, I need to reach out to recruiters and to hiring people. And I will say I was terrified because it wasn't natural for me to do that. I was someone that had always sort of made my own way. But I was like, I need help, and I need to talk to the people who can help me, who can actually teach me what to do.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this message.
You might think it's just a getaway. A few days off, a change of pace, a little space to breathe. But the real part? That sneaks up on you. A laugh shared over dinner feels like medicine. A simple moment with a stranger starts to feel like something familiar. And then it hits you. You're not just visiting a place. You're being seen, heard, known. And before you even notice, you're not just taking time for yourself, you're rediscovering parts of you that got quiet. Between clinking glasses and sunrise stories, something shifts. These women who started out as strangers, they feel a lot like sisters now. We didn't just plan a trip. We made space for something real. We said it would be special. We just forgot to mention it's the kind of special that stays with you. So if you're ready for more than just time away, if you're ready to connect, come find your place with us. Start your journey at sisterhoodtravels.com.
Let's dive right back in. Recognizing that you need help and asking for the right help, I think is such a huge victory, especially for introverts, because not easy to get out of your shell. Believe me, I know. Wow. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, obviously, the two ways I asked for help. One was that I had checked into that psychologist, and so she was helping me with the emotional and the mental challenges that was going on from that trauma, from all the traumas that had accumulated. Because I remember her saying to me, she said, Wendy, you've had a very violent life. You've grown up in South Africa. You've been tear gassed. You've been shot at. This, that. She said, then you come to Australia, and then you're in a bank robbery. Then you meet this person, and she said, there's just violence after violence. And she said, no wonder you're so traumatized. See, I never saw it like that. All you're doing is you're surviving. So you don't know that these things are compounding and it's impacting you in different ways. So one of the best help I got was to go and see her. And I encourage people, I say to people, don't think like there's something wrong with you. There's a level of strength when you go to a psychologist or someone who can emotionally, mentally, and spiritually help you, right? If you know you need that help, don't look at it as a weakness. It's a strength because it got me on the path that then followed. And then the other part was I knew I couldn't figure out how to earn more money on my own. I had to go to the people that give you more money, which is the hiring people and the recruiters. And here's the thing, when you need help, ask for it. And sometimes you have to step out of a comfort zone. And I did. I remember the very first. So what I did was I reached out to a recruiter that I knew. And I asked her for a coffee. And then I said to her, when we had sat down for the coffee, I said, look, I was very honest with her. Here's the other thing. Authenticity works. If you tell the truth, people will always step up for you. I just said, this is what's happened in my life. I need to create something new. I need to earn more money, I said to her. Because that's all I thought about, was like, I wasn't thinking about a long-term career or anything like that. It was like, I need to earn more money to get rid of the debt to raise my daughter. And so I said, what do I do? And she said, well, you need to get a better resume. She went through my resume. She said, you're going to need to rewrite this a couple of times and I'll help you with that. And then she said, you have to practice interviewing and all these things. So she taught me a level of skill. And then she said, she said, I've got some other recruiters that are in recruiting in different fields. She put me in touch with them. And so I started having coffees with people every 2 weeks.
Wait, you were inviting these people to have coffee with you?
Yeah.
To help you, and they were saying yes?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Human being, and so we're gonna sort of circle around a little bit here, because what I found is that at the grassroots of life, human beings are good. It's our leadership and our governments and our leadership, they're the ones that are messed up, okay? People can agree or disagree with me, but I've found at the grassroots of life, in everyday life, people are willing to help. And I asked with honesty, and I asked with authenticity, and these people helped me. They stepped up for me, they taught me, they showed me, they put me in touch with other people. I still had to do the work. Right? Because here's the other thing.
Of course.
You have to do the work on yourself. Yes. Or if you need to rewrite your resume, or if you need to practice interviews, you've still got to do that. They will show you the way, and then you have to implement what you learn. I was doing this over a period of 8-9 months. Everything that they taught me, that the different recruiters taught me, I was implementing, I was practicing, I was sending out my resume. Was rejected many, many times, and just kept rewriting it and refining it until eventually someone said yes. And I got an interview. I said, okay, that must be the way I need to write it, because I've landed an interview. And I got the interview. I didn't get the job, and I was bitterly disappointed, because I felt like I was ready for this change, and the job was paying about $20,000 more, which was my figure. In my head, that was the figure I needed. I didn't get it, but, and I spoke to one of the recruiters who I was working with, and I said, look, this happened. And she said, go back to the person who interviewed you and ask them for feedback. Be brave. She said, ask them for feedback, because that's going to teach you something. So I went back to that person and I said, listen, I know you gave the job to someone else and I respect your decision, but can you give me some feedback? Where could I have improved? What could I have done better? And she was great. She gave me the feedback. She said, well, you answered these 3 questions. You skimmed over them too quickly. And then these ones, you went too long. You spoke too long and you waffled. And she was great. She gave me the feedback and I took it. I mean, it was hard to hear it, but you take it, because you don't grow unless you're willing to listen to constructive criticism. So, okay, I'm like, okay. And she said, what you need to do is just get more succinct with your answers. She gave me some advice. She said, remember, when you're interviewing with us, she said, we're busy people and we're interviewing more than one person. So you need to keep your answers tight so that we can get all our questions answered, because that's how we're able to assess you.
Right.
Which I didn't know, right? So she had a list of 15 questions. She probably only got to ask me 8 of them because I'd waffled. So by the time the interviews... And so she gave me all this insight, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I went away and I practiced. I mean, I even spoke to the baby. The baby was in a bassinet. I would talk to the baby, bouncing there, like practicing.
I love that. Like, how'd I do, baby? Yeah.
And then I landed probably 6 weeks after I got that rejection. I landed another interview, and this time I got the job. And the job paid double what my figure was.
Wow. I mean, you worked so hard.
Yes.
Over almost a year's time to get to that point. What did that feel like, to know that all your hard work paid off?
Well, I was first in shock, like when they gave me the job, and then when they negotiated the contract and I saw what they were paying, I was like, oh my God. So I was a little bit in shock. But then I sat down and I was also still working with my psychologist then, and I was sharing some of that with her. And she said, well, look what happens. She said, here's the thing, Wendy. She said, when a woman finds her strength and you just continue to go, she said, don't give up. She said, eventually you hit the success. People only don't hit success when they give up. And a lot of people give up just before they're going to hit it, and they don't know it. They don't realize it.
Yeah.
When I landed that job, that was what changed everything for me. My life flew from then. I was able to pay the debt off within 2 years, moved out of my parents' home, created a home and a life for me and my daughter. So life started to change, and the people around me who had seen what I'd been through, the trauma, the loss of the house, and then they saw me in this corporate role, and I was flying and I was earning really good money and was making more money year in and year out. People started to come to me. They said, can you help me? How did you do that? How did you do that within less than a year? And how can I do that? And so I started to help people, that I worked with, family members, friends. I just started to help them with all the things that I'd learned and put together from these recruiters. Like I put a whole system together and taught it to them, and they started getting success. And that was where my career coaching business was born, but it was very much a side business because I was full-time in corporate. I was still running huge projects in corporate. So I only did that probably 5 hours a week, just working with different people to help them. As I came to the midlife stages of life, that had its own impact, and I decided it's time to leave corporate. And so I left corporate about 7 years ago and have been doing this full-time. And I love it. I love it because I get to watch people get their dreams. Sometimes people come to me and they're really nervous and scared, especially women who are struggling. So some women have been through domestic violence and their confidence is shattered, just like mine was. Other women are midlife women like me who went through the menopause and it was difficult. And so their confidence is shattered, And for me, it's just wonderful to be able to step into that and help them find themselves and also identify their skills and their talent and then move it in the direction that they really want to go.
So do you work primarily with women who are maybe in midlife transitions, or do you work with people along the whole age spectrum?
In the last 2 years, it's mostly been women going through the midlife changes because somehow they found me. I've also shared some of my story, and so people know that I went through it myself. I do work with some men, so there's some men who come as well who are getting to that stage of their career where they also want to make changes. I don't do a lot of work with younger people. So for me, it's mostly that mid-level career when people sort of hit that 35, 40, and they're looking to grow in different ways, or they're looking for leadership roles. But fundamentally, the last 2 years has mostly been that midlife.
Do you feel like, I kind of know the answer based on my own experiences, but I don't know how it is in Australia as opposed to the US, but we have a real ageism problem. Do you find that to be true in Australia as well?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we are still quite behind on is having that support for the midlife woman, because we do go through changes. Our body changes, which means our mind, our brain, all kinds of things change. There's brain fog that happens with a woman in midlife. And so they need support. They need to be, they need hours that's going to support the phase of life that they're in. We are very much behind in that conversation in Australia. And some of the women that I work with, what we've been doing is we've been trying to champion that cause. So when these women find their way, one of the things I've asked of them is like, okay, now you go back into your place of work, or if you're going into a new place of work, And we need to start initiating that conversation. We need to be the ones that champion it because the guys don't understand. You know, they don't go through that.
Well, if they do or they handle it quite differently. Looking back now, I'm 65, and I can look back now and I can spot exactly when menopause, I think, started to hit me.
Me too.
And believe me, I was not somebody you would really like to be around most of the time.
Me too.
Well, glad I'm not alone. But there was nobody talking about it, and they
No.
sure as heck weren't talking about it at work. But I felt rageful, and I'm not actually an angry person. I mean, I literally could not control this welling up of rage for literally no reason, like where I literally could take a baseball bat and beat somebody's head through the wall. And I felt like I was losing my mind. But that doesn't just happen when you're at home, it does happen on the job. So when you're coaching women on this, is getting the proper health care to address some of these issues like an important component of what you're doing?
Absolutely. So obviously, I'm not a trained psychologist. So I always say to them, you know, I'm not the person you talk to about that side of it, like the mental health side of it. But we can put strategies together and conversations, and I can give you tips on how to approach the human resources departments of the places you work in, because they are all supposed to be about equity and health and mental health. Well, you need to take care of midlife women's mental health because we do go through stuff. And so, because I went through psychological counseling again through midlife and menopause because I noticed, like you, there was this rage. One of the things that psychologist said to me, she said, you know what, Wendy, sometimes when a woman gets to midlife, something happens. There's a switch that happens. And she goes, I don't feel like pushing on anymore, damn it. Someone needs to listen to me. When do I matter?
Yeah.
Yeah. When do I matter? Why am I always taking care of everyone else's need and not my own? And yeah, I wrote a lot about that through my journal. I actually wrote a book about my whole phase of menopause because I wanted people to know that it's not easy, but that also the conversation has to happen. Now, I have a very supportive partner. I, eventually met a really amazing man. And he, when he read what I'd written, he said to me, he said, I lived with you. And I saw you going through these moods, but I didn't know you were going through this kind of level of challenge within yourself. And he also said, it's made me realize, because he has some really very talented women on his team. He hires for some of the biggest projects in Australia. And he said, I didn't understand why I was losing these women when they got to midlife. Many of them were quitting. Many of them didn't want to be here anymore. And so he's become one of the champions within corporate for midlife women because he's like, I want to keep that talent.
Oh, how fabulous is that? So your business is still thriving?
It is, yeah. Yep. And I'm doing a lot of podcasts around the world. So I'm talking to people from all over the world because my work is getting known. It's, I'm reasonably well known in Australia for my work.
Yes.
But it's starting to get out to other parts, yeah. So
it's Happy Career Hub?
happycareerhub.com is the website, yeah.
Then you also have a series for like rebooting your career, yeah?
Yes. So I've created some video sessions, how to write a great resume, how to do because LinkedIn is very important now. If you want to attract really good jobs, it needs to be done through the networks, and the networks happen on LinkedIn. So I teach people how to do that. So I've got a bunch of different video series that people can look at and buy. But then also on LinkedIn, I put things up every day. I post articles every day and I put videos up regularly teaching people, little tips and tricks. And all of those are on my LinkedIn handle for free.
One last question for you. How is AI changing the landscape for job seekers, especially in this age group?
So significantly, I actually went and I did some studies in AI because I recognized very quickly, because of Peter, my partner, and he's hiring in the technology space, and AI is dominating. It's starting to come through really massively. And so I thought, you know what? I need to go learn that skill myself, because I'm going to need to help people with AI and how to use it. It is fantastic for, especially if you're wanting to practice interviews, you can go to AI and get it to help you, right?
Right.
But people are scared of AI, especially in our age group. I'm 58 years old, right? So late 50s, early 60s, we're not used to it. But what I want to say to people is, it's like everything in life. If you use it well, it will work for you. And remember, AI is reliant on you as a human to feed it. So you always will matter. You're always going to be ahead of the AI, because the AI needs you to feed it, to train it.
That's the hardest part, I think, for people, especially in our age group, to understand. And it took me a while to understand that it's nothing without me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a time saver. And because I've been using it for a while now, and now it knows the way I write, the way I want to speak, the words that I use. And so if I say, give me some ideas on this, say I'm deciding to write a book, because I'm writing a book on emotional intelligence and leadership at the moment, and I feed it and I say, give me some ideas. It comes up with the ideas so quickly. Now I'm still responsible for how it's finally generated, but it helps me think faster. And that's where a lot of companies are recognizing that AI can really work to their advantage.
Yeah.
And so you will be left behind if you don't get on board with AI, because
Agreed.
companies are moving towards it now. One of the trends that's happening is corporates are starting to hire older people, because they recognize there's a level of wisdom and a level of calm that comes with that person. So some of the younger ones, when they're coming through, they don't yet know how to weather the storms.
Right.
And so they make
Right.
mistakes, or they panic when projects start going awry or going off the rails. Whereas people who are in their midlife, they've weathered the storms. They know that it's just a passing phase and that you get through it and so on. And they know how to get through it.
And they tend not to be drama queens, and they tend to have in my opinion, a more stable work ethic.
Correct. And so that is the trend. So we are on the cusp of a trend where we are being valued more. And if you get on board with a bit of the AI, and you don't have to know everything about it, you just get on board with the basics, you're going to become invaluable in the hiring space. And that's one of the messages I like to give women. It's like, it is only beginning for us. 50 is only beginning.
That is such a great way to actually end the show today, because I preach this all the time. I had these women who travel together. They're in their 80s, and they have like all these little sayings. They're like, we're 81 and we're not done. We're 82 and we're not through, right? I mean, I love that. I hope I'm still saying that when I'm at that age.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for getting up so early to do this.
Oh, it's a
with
pleasure.
me.
It's been wonderful chatting with you.
If you like this show, please be sure to like us, follow us, subscribe to us, give us a review, because it really helps grow our podcast.